So to challenge your changes in the API piece, if you write it as an API and you've built this API in a dozen different client files, those APIs change. You have a dozen different client files to go and update the
That's
code
true.
because the API
Yeah.
changed. Claris Connect, you have one connector to go and make the tweaks to, and everybody's fixed and rolling in half an hour.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yes. Well, you have a dozen different connectors that you have to adjust.
Well, no,
close.
you're right, because you can't edit a connector that's already been published. So you'd have to dupe it, make the change, and then replace it out. But you only have to make the code change once, as opposed to go into everybody's code file and change it.
So we're back again this morning with the DevCast. Want to thank Beth from Scarpetta Group for joining us this morning and chatting a little bit about Claris Connect. Kind of excited to recap Claris Connect in the last little while. I work with it intermittently, but not every day, so I'll definitely be learning something today. I know Beth and I both went to the Build, Grow, Learn conference in Greenville, South Carolina recently, co-sponsored by the Scarpetta Group and a number of other members of the FileMaker community, Kalos Consulting, and Susan Fenneman's company, Beyond the Chaos, as well. I thought it was a really good conference. I really enjoyed your session on Connect, Beth, and was particularly excited when you showed the custom connector we did for Risotto Sign. So just to throw it out there, how did you like the conference? Any takeaways particularly?
I loved it. And I loved the mix of the small business side with the development side. So there are a couple times I'm going, well, crap, which session do I choose? But can't we repeat them so I can do both tracks? Because I may not be a business owner, but we're a small business, and there's a lot of pieces that I could have gained from some of this other sessions than what I attended. I think the one I really was excited about was the one I was speaking during. So no way to be in two places at once. No, but the session was great. There's a lot of stuff to be learned in there, both development side as well as small business. So we tried to cover basically across the gamut: marketing, finance, all kinds of things, attorney stuff, human resources. We covered everything in there. Not me personally, but
I totally agree. I think yours might have been the only technical session I went to. I really enjoyed some of the sessions on managing your business, especially the business operating system session, but also the sales management. Some of those sessions, really good content.
Yeah, Susan does a great job too. Matter of fact, I had a technical epiphany at the end of her non-technical session, and I went, I've been thinking about this all wrong. So
care to share?
She really makes you think. Well, actually, it was a Claris Connect roadblock that I was hitting, and the limitation that Connect has with not being able to have a period in the endpoint. And one of the systems that we want to integrate with, every single post is whatever it is .json. I went, you got to be kidding me. So I'm sitting here hitting this roadblock. I'm like, well, until Claris fixes this, I'm stuck. And all of a sudden I went, well, why do I need to post it to Teamwork? Why can't I use a webhook and pull it out of Teamwork and post it over here instead? And just thought about the problem in complete opposite direction. And I went, well, that accomplishes everything. And we can keep using Teamwork and posting out to the other solution, to our FileMaker solution that I needed it in. So.
Awesome. Well, let's see. Going back to Connect, as you were putting your presentation together, were there any big takeaways? Anything you learned from putting your presentation together that you want to highlight?
I learned, even though custom connectors are designed to be a little more or a little less, I need to know APIs, you still need to understand APIs. I had several I could not get to work, and I'm like, I don't know all the pieces in an API. I've brushed over a few, but I haven't really delved into API building myself. And there were several walls I just kept hitting. I'm like, okay, I don't get it. What am I doing wrong? You still really need to understand an API to even use custom connectors. So I was hoping it would dumb it down a little bit, and it does, but not as low as where I've had apparently. So, which is why I ended up using Zoto Sign, because I'm like, well, somebody's got it working and I'll just use this one. So I've got this example. Because one of my colleagues ran into a different issue. It had something to do, I think they've resolved it since, but it was the body of the body is what he needed. And it wasn't giving that next layer. So he was basically getting a response back that was empty, because he needed that next layer down. So everybody that had been trying to do things kept hitting different roadblocks within Custom Connector. So, but you guys had the successful one, and I said, awesome, let me use that. Then I have a good example that works, because I reached the point of I just can't put any more time into it, because the two that I was trying were the teamwork and Facebook. And Facebook with the multi-layer authentication, I couldn't get my head around it. So.
Yeah, I think that's something I'm sure other people who've worked with it more than I would comment more on this than me. But I think that's something we've all commented on from time to time about Connect, both with custom connectors, but also just generally speaking, it doesn't completely free you from having to go look at the API documentation and getting an understanding of what's going on at that level. So I don't know if Kate or Jacob, anybody who actually worked with custom connectors, I haven't. So if you guys have any thoughts on the current state of custom connectors, or
I mean, it seems like, so when were they released? Was it last summer or last year sometime? Right?
I want to say March, but I'm not sure why I want to say March. Maybe September. Maybe it was September. Maybe that was it. I don't know.
It was longer ago than March. I know it was at least last year, but
yeah.
We did that users group meeting here in Seattle where we hosted a custom connector thing with Ronnie Rios.
That's right.
So
that was last summer.
That was last summer, so it was before that.
Yeah.
Okay. So and I meant March of 23 is what I was thinking.
Oh, so. March of 23. Okay, good. I don't know if there's been anything else, new features released around then since the original release. I mean, I know they're working on some things, but I don't think anything's public yet.
The OAuth was released in Custom Connector since then, because you can now do OAuth, which you couldn't originally.
Okay.
I don't know when it came out, because I don't feel like they announced it. It was just one of those, well, look at this. Look at these secret. Where did these come from?
And that's not in beta anymore? I thought that. No.
I don't think so, because I went and double checked. I have both my beta through Scarpetta Group account and my personal dev one that I had done first. And that one does not have beta, and it was in both places. Because I did double check before my session. I went, oh no, is this beta? Should I not mention this? And I'm like, oh no, it's not. I'm good.
No, I think you're right. So yeah, and I haven't tested that yet. So I'm not using anything with, have you done anything with the OAuth?
The attempts with Facebook, but so far still failed attempts.
Okay. So. Yeah. So I haven't actually tested that. I know they came out with, a bunch of new connectors. But as far as custom connectors, it seems like it's still pretty much the same basic, the same user interface and that they released initially. So nothing's really changed dramatically there, which is probably good. It's giving us still more time to play with it and get used to it. And get more custom connectors made out there.
Do you guys feel the lack of triggers at this point is really much of a drawback, or the fact that we can do as many actions as we want is still pretty helpful?
It would be really great if they get that trigger, feature released, I think, with custom connectors, because it is a major drawback.
I haven't had it as one, but I have a tendency to use webhooks instead. And a lot of things like Facebook, they have their own things built in, and I can use that as the trigger. So then I don't need the custom connector to be the trigger. Because even Teamwork, they have their own built-in webhooks, and I was able to set those up to start pushing information out of Teamwork.
Right.
Yeah, it's nice when you look at an API like Teamwork. You can webhook off well, I don't know, 100 different things.
Yeah, yeah. They pretty much everything they do, I can get a flow started with it because of the webhook.
Yeah. Yeah, we use Teamwork also, and are doing a couple of good custom integrations, one of which is through Claris Connect. So speaking of, let's see, the new connectors, I've got a quick list of new connectors in the last 6 months or so. Azure Active Directory, Clarify, the new Claris FileMaker Cloud Admin API and FileMaker Server Admin API, Claris Server, that one probably doesn't count anymore. Google Sheets, Full Contact, Jira, extensions to the QuickBooks API, or QuickBooks connector, and a number of 4 different ones that I'm guessing none of us are too familiar with, but that are for the Japanese market: Media SMS, Avatime API, Postcode JP, and Smart HR. So a decent little add-on to the number of connectors that are available out there. I know we're working with the Google. Let's see, are we using the Google Sheets? I think we are. We're using the Google Sheets API for one of our projects, actually several projects. So we could try redoing or augmenting some of those with Claris Connect when we're working on that again. Something to keep in mind, Jacob. I think you did all the or at least most of the Google Sheets work we've been doing.
I used Google Sheets a little bit in Claris Connect, and I found it a little limiting because I couldn't get back to exactly what I wanted to edit. But if I wanted to add a new row, not a problem. But I had a little trouble navigating otherwise.
Yeah. I feel that highlights a thing about Claris Connect that sometimes makes it a little bit hard to use. Sometimes the connectors, you have a connector for what you want to work with, but it doesn't have quite a fully fleshed out enough implementation of the API for us to do the exact thing that needs to be done. And sometimes you have to fall back to the full API integration. I think that's where having custom connectors is. Yeah, that's where having custom connectors is nice, because you can hopefully leverage that to have your own connector for that missing action or whatever.
I'd love to, if they've basically got a custom connector code for all the ones they've pre-built, I'd love to be able to have that in the custom connector side, so that if there are things we can add on to it, if they didn't choose to build those features out, but we could, that would be awesome.
You mean to like build out more actions on an existing pre-built?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So on the ones they already have in there, like the Google Sheets, if the option still exists in the actual API to do it, well, then can I have your base code to start with over in custom connectors, and then I can build out the actions that you didn't think were important, but I do.
Right.
I think I don't have to start over.
Be really valuable, because then we could start with the 60 or 70 or however many custom connectors that are pre-built, and then just build on to those.
Because they've given us there's about a dozen in there as examples in custom connectors that I'm like, well, can't we have all the others too?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Both for, if you could use any existing connector as a template for a new connector, it'd be great for not having to have 2 connectors to the same API, basically. And also as a learning tool, if you could look at.
I was gonna say that would solve my problems with the I don't get this off part. Then I could see how they did it, and I'm going, oh, I reverse engineer all the time. That's how 50% of what I've learned was reverse engineering. But I need to see one that's working that I understand first.
Yeah, and you'd think it would save a little bit of support and training costs on their end too. So it seems like a pretty good idea. Any other challenges with Connect? I mean, sometimes the incompleteness of the connector, I guess, is one. Anything else anybody wants to comment on challenges that they've faced with Connect that we all hope to see improvements on?
I mean, touching on what we were talking about last week about error capture, I was curious, Beth, how you handle error capture in Claris Connect. because I think it's a really important topic and one that we have some tools to handle it, but I struggle a little bit with really like trying to test an error accurately, right? Let's say like, yeah.
So I don't really have anything built into Claris Connect for error capture. I have something built into my scripts that trigger flows, because I've had some issues where the flow doesn't get triggered. It never hits Claris Connect for me to get an error on the Claris Connect side. It just doesn't, something in the script doesn't hit it. So I have an error capture in my script that says trigger the flow. And if for some reason that didn't work, send an email and do it this way instead. So I have a backdoor for that. But inside of Claris Connect, I haven't done much. Most of my flows are pretty short. And I kind of use a post to Slack in them as my confirmation that it came through.
Yeah.
And then I can say, oh, I just did it and I didn't hear a ping. Crap, what happened? I know I still have an error in here and I need to fix it. And then I have the notifications turned on if there is something wrong with the flow, that we get notified that an error happened in the flow. But as far as building it into the flow itself, I haven't done much with that.
So you're not using the can't remember the flow name, but there is a flow on error, I think it's just called.
Yeah.
You're not using that at all.
I'm not.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that's the way I should be doing it. You're pointing out the flaws in my flows.
I mean, it's just one of these things where I think Claris Connect, I mean, the whole idea behind it is about automating workflows, right? So it's like, we don't have to, like, it's easy, and then we set it, and then it doesn't need human interaction. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the big pitfall in there is that what happens when it doesn't run and when it fails, and how do we, make sure that that's getting accounted for? I don't know. It's, I don't know. And we talked about all this last week, so we had a big, long discussion about error capture, but I think it's especially important in the realm of Claris Connect as well.
The ability to really easily post stuff to Slack is one of my favorite features in Connect.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to comment on that. Sorry, I was going to comment on that. That's, it's funny, but that's sort of a brilliant sort of backup. Like, you use it for your console so it can tell you whenever something happens, and if your backup has an integration there, you can have it tell you when it doesn't happen, right? So it's a centralized messaging service that's independent of everything. So if everything else fails, you'll at least see it in Slack, right?
Yeah, I do it a lot with testing, even where it's not something that's going to stay as part of the flow, but as I'm building the flow and I'm testing and making sure it's work, it's so much faster to hear, yep, my ping happened right when it was supposed to, rather than go, did it work? Was it a success or a fail and whatever? It's just, for me, it's faster in testing. And then I can take the Slack notification back out if I don't want it.
Mm. That's another feature would be nice, is a way to disable and enable steps in the flow, right? Like the same way we have with scripts, right? Because you have to either remove the step entirely or put it back in. But
no, I like that idea.
Comment out a flow step or
yeah, well, we do that with scripts. We put our little test feature, or while we're testing, I needed you to run it local, but when it's actually running, it's going to be a PSOS. So we put that kind of thing into our scripts. Why can't we do that in Claris Connect? That makes a lot of sense.
I guess, I mean, you could, if they don't add it in, you could build a conditional logic in there that would give you a testability, but it would just be so much easier if you could just enable and disable script calls. Yeah.
Right. Right. You have to add more steps. And I guess that's part of the beauty of Claris Connect too, is like, it's usually your flows can be really short, right? It's like really succinct. And I like that about it. I mean, they can be complex too, but I like the simplicity.
I had one that had all of like 8 steps and I just turned it into 2. And when it was only 8 in the first place, but it was processing 2 different kinds of forms in one thing. And I went, you know what? I think I'd rather just the 2 forms have separate webhooks. And then we keep them separate and we know for sure the right fields are getting set on the right thing when it pushes over into FileMaker. So I went, it was all of 8 steps and I still decided to split it in half.
I'm just curious about, are you having, like what kind of creative uses have you found for Claris Connect besides, the more traditional, like, yeah, I mean, automating a workflow, like, are you using it for any other kind of, interesting outside the box kind of, yeah, notifications or logging or something like that?
So I've got one client that is using it for, they send incoming clients forms and they have the Google form inside of their Office 365. They fill in the form, the webhook hits, and then it says, great, you're this kind of form, go and create the record in FileMaker. And it pushes all the data into their FileMaker where they can go through and say, okay, this is this client, this is that client. Nope, create a new client, and they can manage those forms there. And then part of that flow that we haven't finished building yet is going to be, oh, great, now you submitted the form, here, go sign these documents. So that's the next step. They're having trouble with their account right now. They haven't upgraded it to the API piece. I take that back. They upgraded it to the API piece, but the software has not updated for them. So they're still waiting for that to happen. We do it for support tickets and feature requests that are built straight into our FileMaker solution. So the client can go up, we have a menu at the top bar where they can select, just like you select file and scripts, they select Jarvis or Shedverse and they say submit support request. It pops a card, grabs the data of who they are, what layout they're on, and then they can say, this is what my issue is. And when they hit submit, it triggers the flow. For one of ours, it's our company and our partner company that have paired together. So not everyone is Scarpetta Group staff, but we send stuff to Freshdesk, we send stuff to Slack, we get everybody notified so that whoever's watching for tickets at that time can say, oh, I see it, I got it, I'm on it. And based on which client submitted it or what priority level they put on it, adds it to different channels and gives it different priorities and kind of things in those solutions. Feature request works similar to the tickets. They can say, hey, I'd love to see this, and it comes into a holding pattern for us of these are features that have, or requests that have come through of things that people want added. Those are the big ones that we use like every day, all day, every day.
That sounds like a perfect use case for Connect, where you're diving into different systems and using Connect as sort of a hub to coordinate.
Yeah, and we haven't pushed out yet to so we've got two products, Jarvis and Shedverse. Shedverse is Jarvis that has been heavily customized for the shed industry. So Shedverse, that's a partnership between us and one of our clients, and then we're selling that product to other, basically his competitors. So we've got about half a dozen people over there, different files that can submit those tickets into the one system. But we're looking at doing something similar with support for all of our Jarvis clients. So then it's going to be in everybody's Jarvis file that they can submit, and we can manage everything through Freshdesk coming in from, a dozen or more different clients.
Yeah, and that really highlights the aspect, of Claris Connect, like, and the security as well, right? Because all these systems don't have to be speaking directly to each other. They're all connected through Claris Connect, right? And then it can, disseminate the information to other systems, right? So.
Yep. And so that we don't have to be in a dozen different places looking at things. We can go to the one place that all the information comes to, and then we can communicate out from that to everybody.
I'm going to take a slight risk and dive off our rough agenda and ask, throw out the question about what's everybody's favorite feature request at the moment. If you could have one new thing in Connect right now. One of the previous comments reminded me of mine. So,
well, why don't you start, John? Do you know?
I can start. I'd be happy to start us off. I don't think I'm breaking any new ground when I say the ability to copy and paste flows between projects and between accounts. It makes it pretty hard to develop for our clients if we can't write it in a test environment and deploy it into a client's Claris Connect account. So the ability to either copy and paste or whatever term you want to use, duplicate to another project or duplicate to another account. That's a pretty big one, I think.
Absolutely.
I would say the
Go ahead.
ability to count, to know where the flows are coming from. We've run into that a few times when one of our scripts went haywire and maxed out our monthly amount, and we couldn't track it down. We couldn't look and see where it was coming from. It took a little bit of extra time versus just looking at them all and seeing a chart or something. So that would be really helpful to know where they're coming from.
I think that was a bug in Connect, wasn't it? It turned out not
Right,
to be
right. It was on our side.
our issue at all.
Yeah. And Claris was really great, and they reset our flow for us, so we didn't have to wait the whole month to start over again. But
yeah, right now the only way to manage that is to look at this number of successful attempts on each individual flow to be able to figure that out. Yeah. Oh, that's a pain. Depending on how many flows and how many projects, that could be a day's worth of work right there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for a client that might, maybe a client only has one flow, so it's not a big deal if they're a small client, small project, whatever. But like for us, where there might be several of us doing some testing work and dev work on different flows, and then we have a couple of, we have a few production flows that we use internally, and so trying to keep track of that step count, yeah, it has been an issue on a few occasions.
Yeah, like they have at the top of the project where it tells you how many flows, how many active, and whatever inside the project, where it could do that at the top of each flow, this many steps and this many uses in the last however many days or something.
Yep, that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Seems like it would be straightforward, but.
Well, the suggestion that I made is I'd love to see a way to do calculations in Claris Connect like we can do in scripts. And I know there's the calculator. I'm not talking add, subtract, multiply, divide, but like the date formatter, where you can say, okay, I'm getting it in this format, but this is how I need to take it out in this format. But to do something on the variable like we do inside of scripting, I need to do a substitution. I need to do a case. I need to do, some of those regular functions that we have in FileMaker to be able to do that at the very least on a variable inside of Claris Connect. Because there's a lot of times I go, okay, well, this is the data I got, but I need to manipulate this, or I need different conditions that aren't just an if condition. It's a little more complicated than that. And there's no way to do that inside of Connect. The best solution I've come up with so far is kick it out of Connect into FileMaker, do my calculations and bring it back. I'm like, that's such a waste. It's so hard to do that. So, and that's the one that Edward goes, oh, I like that idea. Let me see what I can do. So he got thinking about that one.
Nice to have the ear of the developers. I guess this would be an okay spot to, speaking about new things, I guess, I don't think any of us have had a chance to work a great deal with it yet, but the availability of the Claris Studio connector coming up before too long, that'll be a good, nice to have new feature for communicating between FileMaker. I mean, for us anyway, particularly communicating between FileMaker and Claris Studio. Obviously, it's not limited to just communicating with FileMaker. But I took a quick look at it, and the list of actions is quite long. So the Claris Studio connector looks like it's going to be a really flexible tool for communicating with Studio. I don't know if anybody has any comments or thoughts on that. I know it's in beta still, and we won't see it for a little while yet.
Well, I thought there is a version of Claris Studio connector available right now, but then there's a new version coming out that will have quite a bit of different features available.
New stuff.
Yeah, because the one they did release that. Can't remember exactly when, but I know we used it a bit, and we discovered some bugs with it about. It was difficult to match up fields. When the fields created in Claris Studio were coming through, they weren't named with the actual field name. They were named in an obscure, reference like, F23. It was an obscure. It was the, ID under the hood, that was coming through. So we couldn't actually, read and write and translate effectively between the two, because it was difficult to understand what data was actually coming through. From Claris Studio. So I'm assuming that's been addressed, or that will be addressed with the next release, one of the things. As well as, yeah, a lot more features. And I know they talked about it in Engage a little bit about this, using Claris Connect as the intermediary to really be able to automate things in Claris Studio. So I think seems like there's a lot of new bright features on the horizon that, yeah, are not public yet, but when they become public, it'll give us a lot more power in how we build web-based interfaces in Claris, as opposed to our more traditional way of, web direct. So yeah, and the Claris Studio connector seems to be a big part of that.
Definitely. Is that showing up in Claris Studio as the Claris Studio beta? Are those the features yet to be released that we're talking about at Engage, or
yeah,
is the stuff in the LTS not in there?
In our Connect account, since we're part of the beta, the Claris Studio beta connector shows up as a connector.
Are you talking about the session at Engage, Zandon?
Yeah.
I believe he was showing the beta features.
Okay. Yeah.
When he demoed that. Yeah.
Yeah, because there are a lot of new features, and it really seemed like you had the ability to do all the interactions with Claris Studio without having to, like, you could run it using the connector. You can do everything remotely. And that seemed really enticing, right? To be able to do all of those features on the fly programmatically from a call from, a connector, which for being able to create stuff without having to go in and actually manually create it was pretty exciting looking, right? You could just you could create a repeatable set of instructions and it would just automatically, create a sheet with a graph and all the different things, right? So you could just programmatically give it some information and it would automatically create that in Claris Studio. It was really exciting from the demos.
Yeah, and it's good because I think it also kind of starts to connect the dots about how the Claris platform all comes together, right? Because I think that was, when you talk about feature requests, the one thing I thought about was it would be nice if FileMaker and Claris Connect were a little, like, the connection between them is a little bit stronger. I know they added that new script step to call a Claris Connect flow. Beth, have you used that yet? Are you using that?
I have.
Okay.
Yep, I'm using that. That's the one. That's why I've got the scripting for the error capture inside my script, because it's if something happens with that flow, if there's an error there, to do the alternate path. But yeah, I use that. The downside I'm still discovering is that you get the same URL. So if you've got multiple flows inside of a project that are all done, they all get the same URL. I don't want support requests and feature request flows triggering at the same time. Those are different things.
Yeah.
And right now I have to have them in different projects. And I'm like, that's annoying.
That's the same problem with the way you used to call a script or call a flow from Claris Connect via a script, using insert from URL. And the workaround to that is to use a webhook, right? So that brings it back to the point of how
it's so misleading though, because as you're using that step, it says, which flow are you calling? And I say this one, and it runs 3. And I'm going, why did you run 3? I only told you to run 1. So it took a while to figure out. I'm like, oh, they all have the same URL. Okay, at least it makes sense what it's doing, but I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong.
Yeah. Misleading.
I remember that taking a while to figure out when we first ran into it a while back.
Yeah. No,
it's so counterintuitive.
Like something that needs to be addressed as well. So,
well, I mean, if it even said when I select 1 and somehow all 3 were selected, I would have figured out that they must be related somehow or something. But it looks like I'm picking 1 from a list of 5, but 3 run, and I'm going, I don't get it.
Mm-hmm. I hadn't encountered that. I'm not using that new step as much. I'm still using the insert from URL or most likely webhooks to trigger flows, because I just find it a little easier. Because also when I use a webhook, then I can also reply with JSON at the end. So if I want to send any data back to my script, right? So I find it's more user friendly.
That's all what you get used to too.
Yeah.
I started playing with it right about the same time that step came out. So I said, I'll just use that step.
Oh, no, go ahead,
Well, I
Brandon.
have a question along those lines. And like Kate and Beth, what causes you to be curious and play with them versus maybe like Jacob, you're like, when would I even have time to play with them? I just need to stick with what I know is going to work. I don't have the time to play, and maybe it'll work. And then I spend 3 hours of not working and I go back to what I wanted to do in the first place. How does that work with those of you who are you're not less experimental? I just mean you've got so much client stuff going already. It's like someone else can figure out Connect. When it's working great, we'll incorporate it. Until then, I'm just plugging along with what I know works.
Yeah.
Well, I get two different answers. One, custom connectors, I started playing with it specifically because I was told I was doing the session at Build, Grow, Learn, and I needed to put it in my session. So I had to find the time to address it. But the other, and a lot of times it comes down to, I don't know how to write the API. The people that know how to write the APIs don't have the time to do this particular piece, and I need it solved yesterday. I can't wait for it to get to when it's on their checklist. So for the support and the feature request, for me, it was Claris Connect can do this. I need to just go play with it and make it happen because I can't wait 2 months before they can get to it. Because it was an internal, how do we do it? It wasn't billable time to the client.
Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Brandon. All the time for me, especially as I'm older, more calcified. How do you adopt new work habits? How do you accomplish that? And how do you train your brain to think about using Claris Connect when it's appropriate versus doing it the same old way? I know when we first started doing this, the Beyond meetup that we started, that used to be the Claris Connect users group. That was one of my goals, was an internal goal, not very, a selfish internal goal, was to, as a mechanism for us as developers internally at Portage Bay to try and learn enough about Connect that it might become a part of your thought process, that when you're trying to solve a problem, that thought, oh, maybe Claris Connect would work, that would happen. Because how do you get that to happen? I mean, that's not an easy thing. We work with our clients all the time where you're like, well, why don't you do such and such? And it's a revelation to them because they just do the same thing all the time and don't think outside the box about how to do it better. It's a life challenge.
Yeah.
I know one of the reasons I didn't really get into Connect early on was because I had this fear, or I don't know, concern, whatever you want to call it, about licensing and the number of connects that it would take or flows that it would take for a solution to work, and how much that would cost the client versus an API call that I could write in no time flat and get it functioning, tested and functioning, rather than having to learn another platform and then worry about licensing.
And that was always absolutely a concern because the clients, we work with a lot of small companies. And when I say small, 3 to 5 is a big company. So they don't want any more expenses added on, whether or not it would make something easier. It's this monthly is already as much as we can go, or this annual is already as much.
It's like most, it's a dependency issue, right? You have to take your dependency tree. You have an API that you're going to interact with. You're going to use Claris Connect as another dependency to interact with that API. And what is the scope limitations of the Claris Connect interaction with that API versus doing it independently? And what failures are you going to add, or what ease of use are you going to add by adding in Claris Connect? And in certain instances, like, it makes it super easy because you're not having to take care of some of the authorization process in your own script and having to manage that. So there are some base features that really come in handy for being able to quickly connect to certain endpoints and interact with them using Claris Connect. But then when you start to go a little deeper, that's where you realize that there's a couple of failures, right? And the connector doesn't allow for this or that. And you start to wonder if you shouldn't start rolling your own. And then how do you maintain that long-term, right, as a dependency? If you are, as the API changes, manipulating the API locally in the script. When you add in a third dependency, you know, you're going to have to maintain that. If you're maintaining it for the next 10 years, what are we going to see as far as that dependency? You know, if you were interacting with Google API, you can expect it's going to change over the next 10 years. But as far as Claris Connect, where is that going to go in the next 10 years in the dependency? Is it going to be able to just sit there and work for the next 10 years? Or are you going to be looking at a complete rewrite in, 3 to 5 years?
So to challenge your changes in the API piece, if you write it as an API and you've built this API in a dozen different client files, those APIs change. You have a dozen different client files to go and update the code because the API changed. Claris Connect, you have one connector to go and make the tweaks to, and everybody's fixed and rolling in half an hour.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yes. Well, you have a dozen different connectors that you have to adjust.
Well, no, no, you're right. You're right. Because you can't edit a connector that's already been published. So you'd have to dupe it, make the change, and then replace it out. But you only have to make the code change once as opposed to go into everybody's code file and change it.
But we do encounter the same issue with Claris Connect where I know I've encountered it with the Zoom connector. Something changed in the Zoom API and our flow broke. And that happened. And again, like it happened silently, right? Like we only noticed because Brandon said, hey, we aren't getting these alerts anymore when people register for fix it. And I was like, okay, let me go in there. And it took me debugging to say, oh, okay, that's what happened. But that could happen, I mean, that's an example of something that could happen, right? On either side of the fence, but that it's like, when an API changes silently, that's a major issue.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to me that's a little bit like the ancient argument in the FileMaker community that's been going on since version 2 or 3 when the plugin API was introduced. Do you introduce an external dependency like a third-party plugin or an API integration? They're kind of similar in the sense that they both could break. They both are a little bit out of your control. They both have potential additional cost. And there used to be, I'm maybe dating myself, but there used to be people in the dev community who would say, "Oh, I would never use a third-party plugin for some of those reasons." I always felt use the right tool for the job at the right time. If it's an effective tool for the client and saves development time and lets them accomplish an important business goal, then use it. Deal with what the changes are in the future.
Well, to dovetail this issue with the previous discussion of being able to duplicate flows between projects and clients, if there was a way to set up some type of a scenario where you've got your primary flow and any changes you make to the primary gets made into the others. So then if you do have 6 clients using the same flow, you fix it in one and everybody's is fixed. So you fix one place for the API and then one place for the sub out this icon, this connector with this one, and then it's all fixed. That would be way faster than going into each client file.
That would be super cool and super modern too.
Well, and it's a realistic way that we might, maintain code, maintain people's solutions.
Yeah, that's not intimately familiar with some of the tools the kids are using these days, but that sounds like standard code repository kind of stuff. Well, we're getting towards the end of our prearranged commentary that we talked a little bit about. Anybody have anything they want to throw out that we've been talking about?
I had something to add. Just for a cool kind of feature request, since we were talking about all this. Better Forms kind of has something. Maybe Claire should talk to them. Basically, it's the dev and deploy model, right? There's a dev environment and a production environment. Could be the same in the Claris Connect realm, and it's as simple as clicking a button, fetching whatever the repo is that they're using, and pushing it into the other repo. It seems like they could probably benefit from, that would be the modern approach, right? The dev and deploy model.
Better Forms did a nice job of that in that UI in better forms. Yeah, if they did something like that in Connect, that does seem like it would be a good way of doing that.
I think we need to get this podcast off to Claris's hands. We got a bunch of feature requests going on here.
I'm sure they've not heard of any of these before.
No.
Anybody have anything else they want to throw in, or I'll do a conclusion?
I was curious about there are 4 new connectors in the Japanese market. Like, what is the comparison? I didn't, we always think North America, we're so limited in our scope. I was curious about that, how it's being used around the world, why Japan specifically?
Japan's a big market for FileMaker, for Claris. I think it's a bigger market on a per capita basis, perhaps, than the United States. Mm-hmm. I think they do better. They do disproportionately well, I think, Japan. And so I think they're just addressing market needs there. Like, why did they implement some of these connectors? I don't know what anybody familiar with Clarify, CLARIFAI? I don't know what it is. I'm guessing, there probably is an important Claris customer out there that wanted it. And I imagine the same thing's true for some of those connectors for the Japanese market. They're probably really important products for the Japanese market, would be my guess.
Yeah. And if you look inside of those, I was just looking at the Smart HR, it's all in Japanese characters description here in Claris Connect. So I'm guessing the connectors themselves are market specific, and they aren't selling their products outside of Japan. So there's no reason to make it available outside of Japan, but it's a very popular one there.
And the other thing we didn't talk about is the emphasis Claris is putting on the education, on the education piece of Claris Connect, which is also, I think that's also mentioned in the release notes about the new student information systems or updates to the integrations with the student information systems. That's an important piece that we're not actively working with, so we're not seeing that, but there's a lot of work we know being put into that, those features as well.
Yeah, the Apple School Manager integration, I think they've put a lot of work into Connect to support that area.
One of the things that I love about Claris Connect is, especially from Build, Grow, Learn, those small business owners that don't use FileMaker, have never heard of FileMaker, could still use Claris Connect to automate things that they already use. Because Eventbrite, Calendly, all of those things are things that any small business owner is using, but they don't have necessarily admins. There's really small teams, but Claris Connect could work as their, administrative assistant in automating processes and processing incoming requests and everything for them, managing events, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, we had a gal who attended the Connect users group before we changed the name to Beyond, who was using a different tool, a bypass service like Claris Connect, a different one. And she showed the flow that she created in that other system. And she wasn't using FileMaker. She was using a collection of other tools, but it was a really powerful demonstration of what a relatively inexperienced user / developer, knowledge worker, whatever term you want to use, could do to take a tool like Claris Connect and build a workflow between three different other systems, none of which is really a hub for anything. Like FileMaker is often the hub for your Connect flows, but she had created a really impressive, fairly complex workflow to automate everything that they were doing, to take in data from a web page, post it to another system, get some feedback from get an approval from somebody, and then send an email to a third person. It was a impressive automation.
Now, that's actually my vision, is to create a Claris Connect session that is for, I don't use FileMaker. How can I use this tool in my business? Because there's so many things you can leverage. They've got HubSpot already built in there. A lot of people use HubSpot as their CRMs, or to connect to their website to collect contact information or whatever, and the automations that can be done through that.
I don't think it's Claris's target market, but there's no question you can do some cool stuff with Connect without necessarily involving FileMaker at all. Yeah. All right. Well, let's seems like a good point to bring things into a conclusion. Thanks everyone for joining this morning, especially Beth. Thanks for joining us and chatting with Claris Connect.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Hopefully we'll have you back in the future.
Sounds good.
Thank you for spending your time with us at the FileMaker DevCast today. We hope you found something useful, something thought-provoking, and something to take into your own development approach. Things that help you to be more productive and to allow you and your team to get more done in less time. Find us online at portagebay.com and filemakerdevcast.com, and also on social media at FM DevCast and Portage Bay. Let us know if we can help you or your company with modernizing your approaches and streamlining your workflow. We look forward to seeing you at the next DevCast.